So we come to the spiritual search via many different paths and for different reasons. Sometimes there's a overwhelming desire to find out the truth of what's going on. Sometimes there's a lot of suffering. We come to the spiritual path looking for something, looking for a way out, looking for something to rescue us. Sometimes we latch on to an idea of enlightenment, liberation, and that sounds like something that will help us to be free of suffering. So we take on these spiritual concepts like ornaments on a Christmas tree. You have to have the right robes and the right beads and the right music, buy the right books. We do all the right meditations. Somehow we're still left seeking. So all these paths eventually lead to witnessing. Yet witnessing is not really a path. Witnessing is simply being still and watching what's going on in thought, watching what the body's doing. Is this purest form of spiritual path. It's simply noticing what's going on, reflecting. As the thoughts come up, they're witnessed. They're noticed. We notice the thoughts register somewhere. We see the body moving about. Yet in this witnessing, something is missed. We're missing the point. In order to witness the thoughts, witness the body, we must be prior to. We must be beyond watching. Because our identification lies with the mind, lies with the body itself. We take ourselves to be the body-mind. That somehow we're watching the body-mind. Somehow we're witnessing the thoughts. And that is very obvious. It's very simple. So any of the spiritual concepts or attainments or ornaments involved in any of the other paths seem to be an additional layer of unnecessary stuff that we've compiled up over time, over our walking down these paths. As we're sitting in meditation, we're just watching the breath. We're just watching whatever thoughts might come or go. We're simply witnessing. We're witnessing what is. We're witnessing what is happening right now. So in this witnessing, it's very clear that the thoughts come and go. And we start to see the mechanism at work, the thinking process. We start to see the compulsions. We see this image of what we are being constructed, being pulled from memories and imagination. This image which is constructed. We see that that is what we've identified with. That sense of me that always has to be just right. Always has to conform to an ideal, a belief. And we know this image from past and future, what it was, which is an image of what I was, what I could be, which is hope, and what I am now, which generally is not what I want it to be. So in this back and forth, we're constantly trying to add and take away and shape this image of what I am. And we do this because we don't know what we are. We have a vague idea that this image never sits still. It's constantly changing. No matter how much effort we put into building this image and shaping it and molding it to perfection, it never sits still. It's never quite right. It's never as we want it to be. So in the gap between what is and what should be, suffering is created. So in this witnessing, we see that mechanism at work. We see the self-image. We see how that's created. We see that suffering comes because this right now is different than what it should be. It's different than what the mind says it should be. We see this all very clearly in witnessing, in not going into that image and not fully identifying with that image. So, in seeing that that is not what we are, in seeing that that is only a temporary image, the question comes, who am I then? If I'm not this image, if I'm seeing the thoughts, if I'm seeing the body, then what am I? What is seeing? What is seeing the thoughts? What is knowing the mind? What is witnessing the body? Because it's very obvious that something's witnessing the body, something's knowing the mind. Yet when we try to pin it down, we can't do it. We can't find that ultimate me who is doing the seeing. We can't find that witness. The only thing we find when we turn that spotlight of awareness backwards to look, to see who is looking, we only find emptiness, darkness, stillness, silence. no one back there who is watching the thoughts. The one who could watch appears as a thought, as an idea about someone. The one who might be there, located in the brain, if you live in this part of the hemisphere, if it might be in the heart or the hara, if you live in the east. We can't find that self-center. We can't locate it. We can't find that point of limited beingness, that confined self, trapped in a body, trapped in the head, wired up to the brain, pushing all the right buttons, looking out the eyes. There's nothing there. We can't find anything. Yet we know that knowing is happening. We know that this witnessing is happening. Seems that we need an object to identify with. We need an image to identify with. But this knowing, this presence, because it really is a presence. It's a presence that we can't find, but we can feel it. The simple feeling of being. This awareness. We feel it. We know it. We know it intimately. We don't often notice it because we're focused entirely on the thought process, that mental mechanism. You'll notice that that awareness is like a light that's shining always, illuminating the thoughts, illuminating the body. That presence is always there. But it's not a thing. It's not an object, or else it would be just another thing that's witnessed. So if I ask, who is hearing this voice? Who is hearing the birds? Who is feeling that body? Who is seeing those thoughts? Who is knowing mind? And we automatically say, I am. I am. So we know that. We know that that's going on. We know that we are. It's impossible to deny that. We know that. Yet that knowing that we are is identified with that body, with the thoughts, with that mental image, with that belief. Yet all those things come and go in this light of knowing, in this presence of awareness. We know I am. We know that. and that I am is a thought. That thought translates that sense of knowing presence. It's pointing straight back to that knowing presence. I am. That simple feeling of being. That obvious feeling of existence. That undeniable knowing presence. The words I am point straight back to that which is undeniable. Yet it's not a thing. It doesn't have a form, no color, no shape, no size, no center. It's not something that we can reference, not something that can suffer, because that reflecting mirror of awareness does not receive the suffering. It's like a mirror. So in the reflection, it could be a sunrise or a war. The mirror reflects both equally. The mirror is not touched by the beauty of the sunrise or the horrible nature of the war. The mirror simply reflects both equally. In fact, the mirror knows nothing of sunrises and wars. The mirror is just reflecting what's there. This reflective nature, that's what's happening. If we look closely, everything that happens, the thoughts come up. In some moments the thoughts are about frustration. In some moments the thoughts are about joy or beauty or clarity. Yet those thoughts are equally reflected in this mirror of awareness. Simply notice that that's the case. So if we're here to talk about Advaita Vedanta, it doesn't really matter about Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta means nothing. It doesn't matter if it's Zen or Taoism or Dzogchen or Gnosticism. None of that matters. That's all the content. That's all labels. What they're pointing to is this immediate nature of pure mind, or pure consciousness, or pure awareness, whatever label. This immediate nature of knowing presence. And simply notice that that's already going on, and that's always been with us. That's never changed. It's never disappeared. It's never needed remembering. It is literally the very essence of anything that appears. The necessity for the thoughts to be known, for the body to be known, for that image of me to arise. Only we're always pointing outward. We're always focused on the thoughts, focused on the body, focused on what's going on. And the thoughts come up and say, this is not good enough. I want it to be different. And in that gap, the entirety of suffering is created. And that knowing presence is simply witnessing that thought, witnessing the belief that it's not good enough, witnessing the creation of suffering. Just like the flower, just like the sunrise, just like the war, it's all reflected effortlessly. So rest in that knowing presence that is undeniable, that is clear and obvious. That knowing presence which is the very basis of witnessing. The knowing presence which is looking at itself right now. Looking at itself as the world. So if we walk outside and we look up, we see that the trees and the birds and the sky and the clouds, we see the grass and the cars and the houses. We feel the breeze against our face. We hear a bee buzzing, landing on a flower. That is the miracle. That is the beauty. That is the celebration. That is life looking at itself. That is the oneness that we've been seeking. Oneness, knowing itself as all things. Not needing any of it to be different. What you're seeking, you're already that. Seeking assumes that it's something different. It's always something different. Has to be different. Suffering is the very nature of the search. Assuming that this is not good enough. And in that search we miss the immediacy of this knowing presence. We miss the beauty and the miracle of this very moment. You already are that. You already are what you're seeking. It's already fully present. Simply notice it. Recognize it. Like seeing an old friend you haven't seen in a while. Suddenly the face appears and it's instantly known. It's instantly recognized. It's like walking through the house looking for your car keys. Looking everywhere. Looking under every corner. And realizing that they're right in your hand. The whole time. Notice that knowing presence. Rest as that. And watch the thoughts come and go. Watch the self being created in thought out of memory and imagination. Does anyone have any questions? So there's really nothing to do, or no one to do anything. Well, as long as we take ourselves to be a separate person, then there's absolutely something to do. As long as we take ourselves to be a separate person, then we must resolve the search. Because it's like a virus. It takes hold of us, and everything that we do is centered around the spiritual search. Spend all of our idle time reading, visiting websites, sitting in meetings like this, all in the hopes of figuring this out, all in the hopes of resolving the search. But when we rest as the witness, we realize that me I take myself to be, the me that searches, the me that needs the answers, the me that could eventually get enlightenment, the me who can awaken, the me who can become liberated, the me who is frustrated, the me who is sometimes clearly seeing this. It's all pointing to that reference point. It's all pointing to that assumed person that I am. And as long as we stay in that, we're going to search forever. We're never going to find an answer. The minute that we realize that witnessing is going on, and in that witnessing, that we see that the thoughts are coming up, we see that the self is being created in this thought process. We see the idea about what I am come about. Then who can do anything? Who can search? Who can become enlightened? Who can get liberation? At that point, then, there is no one left to seek. There is no one left to get anything, to go anywhere. There is no one left to do anything. So the answer to your question is yes and no. And maybe. More questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Notice when nothingness becomes apparent that there's kind of an automatic recoil, as if I'm staring at Jell-O or something. And I don't know how else to describe it. It's just a sense of unfamiliarity or panic or something.
So can you see nothingness? How would you describe it?
I can't see it. I can't see it. It's suddenly apparent.
And where is it apparent from? Who is it apparent to?
If I investigate thoughts and it's seen that all these ideas I have about me are absurd, the thoughts vanish, and what's left is comments, please.
So we recognize this knowing presence, but as you're saying, it's not recognized as something. It's not another object. It's what's doing the looking. Yet it's darkness, stillness, silence. I think jello is a good word. So, we're not used to that. We're not used to being nothing. We need to be something. We need to have something to identify with. Yet there's nothing there. Yet we can't deny it. It's like the Zen saying, you must feel as if you have a hot iron ball in your mouth, which you can neither swallow nor spit out. Just like that. We can't deny it. We can't spit it out, yet we can't quite identify with it because there's nothing there. Yet that burning the whole time is there and it won't go away. And we don't know what to do. We're stuck. So we see that there is no one to be stuck. We see that the idea that I am seeing nothingness, or that I am become aware of nothingness, that's still more thought. That's still more beliefs. That's still an identification, a subtle identification of someone seeing the nothingness. And we see that the seeing is coming from the nothingness. Even the thoughts about the nothingness are being seen in that no thing, in that knowing presence. So we can't ever get behind that. We can't ever see the seer. It's like the eye trying to turn around and see itself. So we simply see that everything, even the most subtle thought about me who becomes aware of the nothingness, we see that those are just more thoughts. And there's literally nothing at all to be done with the thoughts. Nothing at all needs to be done. They come and go, as they always have. Doesn't matter what the content of thought is. Doesn't matter what thought's saying. We're simply seeing the thoughts come and go. We're seeing them from somewhere. Yet we can't put a location on that somewhere. We can't put an object to that somewhere. That knowing presence is boundless, infinite, unshakable. Stillness, silence, formless. Yet even though we can't find it, we can't deny it. We can't deny that that's what we mean when we say I am. And that I am points straight back into this void, right? This absence of anything we can identify with.
I can feel the fear even as you're saying that. It's kind of like vertigo or something, being on the top of a cliff and looking down.
So
it's almost an automatic recoil. It's not. I'm not certain there's a thought, although there may be subtly.
So what is knowing that fear? Is that knowing afraid?
It's tricky.
Is that knowing presence afraid? Or is it simply reflecting the fear, just like the mirror? we see that these things are part of this mechanism. And we see that we're rock solid and unshakable in this knowing presence. Then the fear comes up and it's not a problem. Or happiness comes up and it's not a problem. There's never any involvement in these relative and temporary states or experiences. Whatever's happening is perfectly fine. Even fear. There's no more suffering in that. There's no more attachment to that. The body functions perfectly without your involvement. Fear is a natural functioning of the organism. You're not there to control the fear. You're not there to create happiness. Whatever's happening is happening because of the natural functioning. So if the mind is now subtly injecting fear, which is reflected or echoed through the body, that's perfectly normal. The mind does not want to turn around and focus. The eye doesn't want to turn around and look to see itself. So that's natural. Yet we can't ever deny that knowing presence. So there is no one who is afraid. What you are is simply seeing the fear come and go, just like any other temporary state or experience. So we come back to this knowing presence. One simple little mechanism. Who is it? So if we say fear is arising, who is afraid? Happiness is arising. Who is happy? Well, I'm having thoughts about this. Who is having thoughts? So every single bit of it that could ever possibly arise arises in and is known by that knowing presence. And the knowing presence is the thoughts. It is the body. It is the world. It's the intelligence that's functioning this appearance. We say that God or oneness is the omnipresence, the omnipotence, and the omniscience. The omnipotence is that intelligence, energy that's functioning the heart, pumping the heart, sucking in the breath. Does it take any effort to breathe? If you don't think about breathing, or if you forget to breathe, does breathing still happen? The very essence of the functioning of that body, does that require effort? Or is that happening all by itself? And the thoughts are the same way. The thoughts are happening automatically. The thoughts are happening as a function of this organism. And if that includes fear, then that's perfectly fine. So the sap that's flowing through the trees, the intelligence that in that acorn that holds that entire tree, that stamp of potentiality for that entire oak tree. The gravitational forces that are pulling together all the essence that creates these galaxies. That which is blowing the wind and causing the waves and functioning the nuclear fields in the body, causing the cells to die and regenerate. All this functioning, this omnipotence, that's functioning the appearance. And this omnipresence, that means everywhere, everything is that. Every cell, everything we see, we break it down into the elements out of which everything was created. Every single star you see, every single ant, every single bit of dirt, that hand, that foot, that brain, the tree, every single bit of it is broken down into elements. And those elements are broken down into cells or atoms. And the atoms are made up of this emptiness, this intelligent emptiness, this energy. Every single bit of it is the same. This omnipresence, this emptiness which is everywhere. The very essence of everything that we see, everything that we are. And this omniscience, this all-knowing. And that's this witnessing aspect, this ability for the appearance to know itself. We may call this consciousness. Consciousness is the ability to know ourselves, the ability to know our own existence. And that omniscience is always there. So this knowing presence is functioning the appearance, functioning every single bit of it, looking at itself, awed by its own presence. Even the thoughts that come up to deny this are immediately witnessed and effortlessly allowed, effortlessly reflected. Even the fear that comes up. This whole seeking process is just part of the natural functioning of that organism. There's no one there to do anything about it. There's no one there to seek, no one there to find, no one there to be rid of seeking. If seeking's happening, that's perfectly fine. If seeking is stopped, that's perfectly fine. Whatever it is, it's the natural functioning. There's no you in there doing any of it. It's this one without a second. This one substance, this intelligence energy, this intelligent presence that is knowing itself. There is no you in there doing any of it. It was sort of a long answer. So is there a reason or purpose anywhere? So reason or purpose comes in the mind. So that's the filter. Everything that we see, we put on a meaning, we put on a purpose. And that all happens in the mind. And that becomes very clear when we rest as the witness. And we see that process at work. We see the mechanism. We assign meaning to it. And that's always relative, because what's meaningful to you may not be meaningful to me. So these false reference points, this you and this me, we have relative meanings. There's no absolute meaning that stands apart. It's always relative in the mind. Please speak more on the witness. specific to a seeming other thing called a witness. It seems here that even the witness isn't. Absolutely. The witness is still duality. The witness is still subject-object equation. This me, who's the witness, and the world containing even thoughts in the body, the appearance itself. So it's still a subject-object. It's still the witness of the appearance. Yet we see that the witness is a presence. The witness is a knowing presence. And that presence has no location. It has no center. It's boundless. It has no boundaries. It seems to go on and on forever. And that witness, that knowing presence, includes all of the appearance. So we say, I am hearing a bird. This is language. This is duality. There's an I who's hearing a bird. So that's a creation in mind, a conceptualization of what's going on. So the minute that we say, I am hearing a bird, then we've seemingly separated out the appearance, separated out the presence into an I subject who is hearing a bird, which is the object. But if we don't conceptualize it, if we didn't have any thoughts, if we didn't know what a bird was, or what we didn't have an idea about what I meant, then what would be happening? The pure experiencing itself, the pure hearing. We have no idea about a bird song. The pure experiencing itself is the immediacy. And then after that, the thought comes in and conceptualizes it. It puts an ownership on the hearing. So even the witness itself is duality. If the fear is the knowing presence, how does it also show up in the knowing presence? I'm not sure I understand that. I'm not sure I understand that question. Anything can come up in the appearance. Sunrises and wars and happiness, fear, joy. But we only know about those things because we have words for them. We have concepts. So what's the difference between fear and joy? They're both sensations. But we put weight on them. We put preference and meaning on them in our concepts. So fear's coming up. That's obviously if a bear started to chase the body would experience fear. That's a natural functioning of that organism. It's a survival mechanism of that organism. So fear comes up, and it's natural. Anything that's threatening that body, the mind will inject that fear. And then the body will feel that, and then something will happen. It will run away or fight. And that's natural. So if fear is arising, then the organism is seeing that as a threat. It doesn't want to die. That's it. It doesn't want to die. It has been said here that all in the knowing presence bit. Also that something can show up in the knowing presence. Sorry, my friend, I don't really understand what you're saying. It has been said here that all is the knowing presence, but also that something can show up in, yes, absolutely. It's an appearance, like a mirage. So the mirage comes. Is it really water? Is there really water up there on the road? It's an appearance. And we realize it's an appearance, and we no longer try to quench our thirst, but it still appears to be water. If we walk in the room and we see a snake, but we find out later that it's a rope, and we walk in there, we see it, and we still may sort of think it looks like a snake, but we're not really gripped by that fear anymore, because we realize that it's just an illusion, it's just a mirage, it's just an appearance. So to say that something appears in the knowing presence is still a concept, it's still to conceptualize. It's still subject-object, it's still duality. So if we say nothing appears, then that's not really very helpful either, then is it? So as long as something appears to be appearing, then what is knowing that appearance? And we realize everything comes up in that knowing. Every single thing we ever have known has come up in that knowing. Presence of knowing. So there are thoughts coming up. And there's a body there. And there's an idea about the I, about me, about the self. How are those things known? How are those things known? So something is knowing the mind. Something is knowing the thoughts. Something is knowing the idea of me. So that knowing is happening right now, functioning in the immediacy of this very moment. It's an activity that's going on. Knowing, seeing, awareness. So this is just presence in the body-mind. The body-mind appears to that presence. Something is knowing the body and the mind. And we conceptualize that as functioning of the body-mind. Yet, when the body-mind itself disappears, that functioning is still present. So right now, we call this the waking state. And when we go to sleep, we lay our head on the pillow, and all these dreams unfold. And they're very realistic, and the functioning of belief is still going on. Because when we wake from that dream, sometimes we have to question whether that really happened or not, or was that just a dream. So that functioning of knowing is happening there, seeing the dream state, seeing the waking state right now. And then in the deep sleep state, there are no objects. There is no sense of me. There is no body. There is no mind. Yet that knowing is still there. That knowing is still functioning, even in deep sleep. How else would you know that deep sleep happened? Otherwise, you would just go out and you'd be right back, and you wouldn't have any idea that sleep happened. You know there was an absence of consciousness. You know that the body-mind went away. You know that the world, in this picture, in this appearance, you know that that was gone. The essence of what you are remained throughout this parade of states, waking state, dream state, deep sleep state. What you are, the very essence of what you are, remains. throughout all of that. This pure consciousness, or this pure mind, or this pure awareness was always functioning throughout all three of those states. So in the waking state, we call that the awareness as a product of the body-mind. But that's a conceptualization of awareness. That's trying to locate awareness somewhere. Because it is so obvious. It is so obvious that it's there. We have to place it somewhere. It becomes very obvious if we just look. If we just rest as that witnessing, that remains throughout the cycle of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. How do you know that you are in the awareness state? No, that's a very good question. So, awareness is not a state. So we may talk about states as fear, states as happiness. Maybe we have a spiritual state. Maybe we have an experience of some sort of spirituality. So the state before that is the waking state itself, right? It's because that even comes and goes. But awareness is not a state. Or they call it the eternal state because it it doesn't stop and start. It just always is. It's like a light that's constantly left on. A light that's constantly shining. So, right now, you are aware. You're hearing this voice. You're feeling that body. You're seeing those thoughts. And so that awareness is functioning effortlessly without any input. It's just there. So there is no reaching, or you don't need to know that you're in the awareness state because you are awareness. That's what you are. That's your natural state. That's your eternal state. That's your natural essence. Awareness. So awareness is just isness. Yes. Yes, the isness of this very moment. The very aliveness of this very moment. The wakefulness of this very moment. And we see that we, in thought, try to conceptualize awareness. We try to place it somewhere. We try to make it the product of the body or the brain or something. But consciousness itself, which is the ability to know ourself, right? The ability to know our existence, that even comes and goes. This whole entire world appears in consciousness. Without consciousness, we wouldn't know the world. Without consciousness, we wouldn't be aware of this body, of this mind. But that's identified consciousness. That's consciousness, which is the purity of immediate awareness, is identified with the appearance, identified with the body, identified with the mind. But pure unidentified consciousness or awareness or knowing or whatever label you want to use, that's immediate and happening throughout all the states. That's the isness, just like you said. That's the very essence of all states that could possibly ever come and go. That's the background against all states. So there is no reaching this state. You can't get out of it because that's what you are. And it isn't something that we need to do to find awareness or remember awareness. You know that you are. You don't have to go around all day reminding yourself that you are. Oh, am I still here? Oh, yes, I'm here. Do I still exist? Oh, yes, I still exist. I don't have to keep reminding myself that. You know that you are. It's automatic. It's effortless. But that's identified with the body-mind. And that's where suffering comes in. that which makes it impossible to deny that you are is that knowing presence, that pure, unidentified consciousness, or that awareness. Without that, you wouldn't be able to know anything. That's the very root that's necessary before the idea of I am comes. Shiona, are you okay over there?
Speechless.
Good. So we find that there is nowhere to go. Nothing to get. Everything that we've wanted to get has always been a concept. Always been some addition to this picture of me, or this image of what I am. And we simply see that our beingness is knowing presence, which never changes and never goes away. It's always there. Always. And it's not something that we have to find. It's not something we have to remember, because we already are that. That's what we are. That light is always on. The light is always on, yes. You don't have to change the light bulb. Must be allergic to Sunday mornings. What about when we forget? Yes. Driving a car, not remembering how we got to a place. Yes. So that really is evidence that that body is functioning itself. The life is living itself. We can drive a car and eat a sandwich and look at a map and talk on the cell phone at the same time and not miss our exit. And we're not really sure how we got there. That functioning was happening without our conscious attention, without our mental involvement. But I think the core of your question is, what about when we forget awareness? But can you forget awareness? Do we need to remember awareness? The thoughts come on, and then attention is put on the thoughts. So I need to bake a cake today. So I go into the thoughts, and I figure out how much sugar, how much whatever goes into a cake, flour, chocolate. So I have to figure out how much. I have to figure out what amounts. I have to figure out how hot the oven should be. I have to figure out how long to put it in for. But all the while, awareness is knowing these thoughts. So I didn't have to continually say, I am awareness, I am awareness, I am awareness, so I don't forget. Awareness is aware of the thoughts. It's not something that we need to remember. It's not something that we could ever forget. we need to remember to remember. No. These are only mental concepts. You are awareness. How could you forget that? No matter if the thoughts are going on. And if we identify with the thoughts, if we don't recognize that we are awareness, then we suffer, because we take ourselves to be a limited character. We take ourselves to be someone who the suffering applies to, a reference point that doesn't exist. And just seeing clearly that awareness is the only thing we can be, this knowing presence. That, how can we forget that? Just like the mirage, just like water, we've seen through that belief. We've seen through it. We don't have to be reminded that it's not water, it's not water, it's not water. We just know. And in that place is no fear or negativity. What you are sees the fear come and go, sees the negativity come and go. But really the fear and negativity, other than that which is simply the functioning of the organism to survive, most of the negativity is generated in mind, in referencing that me, referencing that central character, or that reference point. So the negativity comes up when this is not the way it should be, when I have a preference and it's not fitting in with what is. So then negativity comes up. When we see that there's never anywhere to go, we see that we're not this central reference point, this fictitious character, then all this suffering has nowhere to land. It has nothing to latch onto. This back and forth in memory and imagination to create this image, just that compulsion's just not there, because there's no compelling reason to do it. There's no impetus to go back and forth in thought, memory and imagination, past and future, in trying to keep this character up and trying to keep that image going. It just loses its fuel. There's just nothing there, and there's no investment in that character, because it's not what you are. And if someone comes up and talks to you, you say, I'm talking to you, or I'm having conversation, I'm having breakfast, I'm baking a cake. But that's just language. There is no one there that's being referred to. What is. What's happening is perfectly arising. And there's no need for it to be different. There's no one there who has preference on this moment. It's just seen to arise exactly as it should. And there's no need to make it different. So the compulsion falls away, and clearly seeing that there's no one there. There's no one there in that body. There's no one home. So who cares? Who's being referenced? Who has negativity? No one. You're talking about emptiness. Well, emptiness is a word, a concept that we can use, but emptiness is often misunderstood as just nothing there. Emptiness is presence. Presence which is one without a second. So every single bit of the appearance is that one without a second. Every single blade of grass, every single bee buzzing around the flower, that feeling of that body, the thought that comes up, the sun, the clouds, the planets, every single bit of the appearance is life, living itself, oneness seeing itself. So we talk about the essence of the appearance being emptiness. We're saying that it's not what it appears. It's not solid and separately existing entities. It's not separate from oneness. The emptiness is oneness. The emptiness is the isness, the essence. Not two, no separation. The presence doesn't need to find itself because it's already everything. It's hidden very well. You would never think to look there, huh? Anywhere you look, that's it. Any thought that comes up, that's it. Except when we identify as a small piece of that, then we're trapped, apparently. We're separated, we're bound, we're subject to the forces of this alien world. But that's simply a misidentification. It's a mistake of perception. It's identifying with one of the objects that you're seeing. You were never bound. Never. You're always all of this. Any words coming yet, Chiono?
No, I'm aware that of what you were just talking about. I'm aware that I can take on some of it as beliefs, like awareness always being here. I've heard many, many times, and it feels like a belief more than a felt thing.
Absolutely. So in this witnessing, we see all this happen. We have a front row seat to the mechanism in progress. We see how thoughts come up and formulate all these beliefs and concepts. And we see that everything that we've ever known has been created in this way. If we just simply look at the immediacy of present awareness, the clear nature of mind, we simply rest in that. Then we see that thoughts come up, and they're giving color and commentary to everything. They're adding labels on top of the direct experiencing. So there's a sensation, and then thought comes up. That's a foot. That's a flower. That's a cloud. So the color and the commentary is added on top of that. Direct experiencing. But yet, thought itself is another experience. So there's the direct experience, and then there's the thought, which itself is another experience. So we say, who is the experiencer? Who is experiencing thought? Who's experiencing the additional labeling on top of the direct experiencing? And we see that thought is equal to it. Thought comes exactly the same way as that sensation of that foot, that sensation of the clouds. It only happens as an experience. So the appearance or the experience comes as one solid block. And then the mind breaks it all up, separates it all out into this and that. A me seeing a world. That's a foot, that's a cloud. That's in here, that's over there, that's out there. So mind creates all this commentary. But mind is equal in appearance. Mind is another experience. So who is behind the screen? Who is behind the screen watching all of this? Can you find that? that arising
No,
as
there's
another
nothing
experience?
found.
Yes, yes. You can't see the seer because that's what's doing the looking. That's what's pure experiencing. Pure experiencing is happening. And that's really all that we can say unless we go into concepts about it. Pure experiencing is happening. We can't find an experiencer. We can't find an experience. We can only say pure experiencing itself is happening. And we have to go into the mind to create the subject and object. We have to go into mind to create the commentary about it, to create the labels. And those thoughts are equal in appearance to everything else. They're still just experience, bouncing up off against that screen of experiencing just like everything else. Yet there's no one behind the screen. There's no one back there looking. There's no little man back there behind that screen, wired up and pushing all the right buttons. It's an empty knowing presence, a pure consciousness or pure mind. It has no shape or characteristics or attributes or size or color. It's nothing we can identify with. Yet it's ever present. It never goes away. It's always with us. It is what we are.
Yes, I see what you mean.
And that knowing presence never suffers. In fact, suffering itself falls away because there is no investment in a character that can suffer. The one who suffers is a mental concept. It's commentary about experience. It's thought coming up and talking about experience. And thought is more experience. So we can never conceptualize that. We can never conceptualize this knowing presence. We call it knowing presence, but that's just as meaningless. It doesn't mean anything. But it points to something. It points to something undeniable. We call it pure mind. In Buddhism, it's called pure mind, or big mind, or whatever. It's recognizing the empty nature of mind. But yet mind is still a word. It doesn't mean anything. Mind is nothing. Mind is just a concept. We talk about mind, we're really talking about thoughts and memories and mental pictures and songs that get stuck in your head that won't go away. We conceptualize all that as mind. The mind really doesn't mean anything. Mind is nothing. We think the mind is a thing by itself. It's like a place or something, like a little radio announcer's booth. Something that the little man's in there talking from, so for the whole world to hear. But that's just a concept. It's just a way of conceptualizing something that we haven't investigated. So pure mind or pure consciousness. Pure consciousness is another way to point to it. So consciousness is the ability to know what's going on, right? Consciousness. We're conscious of it. That's identified consciousness. That's consciousness as the result of the brain, or consciousness as the facility of the organism. Yet pure consciousness is the same as pure mind. It's just simply clear, present knowing, clear, present awareness. And that is immediate. That is always going on. That is constant. Everything within it changes. So we might say that awareness is a container, space. And in that unchanging space, in that unaffected space, everything's coming and going. Everything's changing. Everything's moving. And then on top of that, thoughts come in, which are part of that appearance, and are providing all the commentary, talking about this appearance, creating meaning and purpose for the appearance, creating the illusion of separation of all of this. But that container is always there, that knowing presence, that space is unaffected. And it's always primary. It's always the very essence or isness of everything that's going on. It's the very screen against which all this is happening. That awareness is undeniable, yet it's not something that we can identify with. The very idea of identification falls away because there's no one there. There's no one there to identify. There's nothing to identify with. We're backed up into a corner. We're at the edge of the cliff. We've run out of space. We've run out of words. We've run out of concepts to talk about it. We've run out of ideas about what I am. I've constantly tried to conceptualize this that is obvious, this knowing presence that is obvious. And everything that comes up, I negate because that's not it. That's not it. That's an object. That's an object. That's being known. There's still something beyond seeing that. There's still something beyond witnessing that. So continually negate what's coming up as not what I am. Not this, not this. And then we come to the edge of the cliff because there's just nothing else to negate. There's nothing else. It's just this seeing, this knowing, this awareness. That's it. So we fall. But there's nothing to fall. There's nowhere to go. Because the very ground that we're standing on is just another appearance, just another conceptualized appearance. So we have nowhere to go, nowhere to fall, and no one to fall. Just constantly knowing that we are. That's it. Are there any other questions? Did everyone fall off the cliff? Love to you, my friend. I think we have to wake up Sergio over here. He's snoozing. Hello, Dark Rain. How are you? Perfect as always. How else could it be? So Dark Rain is the teacher of the Gnosticism class that happens here on Thursdays. And if you're not familiar with Gnosticism, it's been called Christian mysticism. It is another non-dual tradition. The Gospel of Thomas is a very good example of this tradition. And really, sort of the principles of non-duality are there very clearly in Gnosticism. So if you'd like to, more than happy to speak in the meeting. You're more than happy to talk about your class, and if anyone's interested in attending, that would be fantastic. Diva, if you're a member of the Osho Island group, he sends out notifications to that group, and his class takes place in the same location. How you doing over there, Wuji? Well, in order to wrap up the meetings, we always have a dance, because non-duality is a celebration. It's a celebration of oneness. It's a celebration of the appearance. When we take ourselves to be separate, then we miss that celebration. We miss the miracle of this present moment, because the isness, or what we are, is found in every single bit of it, in every blade of grass, in every gust of breeze. So we sometimes end the meetings with a dance. Anyone volunteer? Anyone need a dance? I think Wuji volunteered last time, didn't you? Thanks for coming, my friends.
Thank you.
Love to you all.
View of us.